This is Open Source Tonight for February 26th, 2020, and I'm your host, Vincent, and today I'm joined by my co-host, Billy, the guy that finally decided to show up and not have to be on a remote.
I've been flooded in for the past week or so.
Week? Decade sounds more like it.
Fair enough.
Anyway, welcome back to the show. It's always nice to have you in studio because, let's be realistic,
It's a lot easier to do.
and it also sounds way better. Anyway,
That we have more to say.
And we have more to say, I guess, according to you. Probably true, though. So let's get right into today's episode, folks. Today's main topic, if you want to fast forward to it for some reason, and why would you do that? Then you wouldn't have the news. But if you wanted to, fast forward probably about 15 minutes or something. I don't know. But we're going to be talking today about app development on Linux, specifically why you would want to develop an app on Linux. And spoiler alert, there's reasons that you would want to. Anyway, let's get right into the open source news. Up first in the news this week, folks, we've got Ubuntu's 2004. They're going to be making some changes to how graphics drivers are picked out. They're going to make it easier, everyone. So they're going to make some new improvements to the additional drivers screen that you can pull up in Ubuntu. Everyone that's used Ubuntu probably knows what this is. You can search for software and updates in your GNOME, search bar, and you can find this little window and go under additional drivers in the little window that pops up there. And it makes it easy to install drivers for different devices, including your NVIDIA or other graphics cards. And so they're going to be doing some new things here when it comes to graphics cards, specifically from NVIDIA. Now, NVIDIA's graphics drivers will be pushed immediately without the need for third-party repos or web downloads at all. They're going to be pushing these with the latest and greatest immediately. So there you go. That will make it easier. I thought they did that in 1804 to be fair, but hey, nice improvement. No complaints here. And so yeah, that is some things they've been changing here. It says here that the software utility that the NVIDIA long-lived and short-lived terms are being used here. So long-lived receives more testing, gets more regular fixes. Short-term, less widely tested, includes newer features, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, so any thoughts on that, Billy?
That sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Especially since I know NVIDIA is more for like people who have like games, stuff like that. But it sounds like it's making it easier to...
I mean, you can do gaming and video production on Linux without NVIDIA, but it's...
Yeah, I know it's for other things as well.
I mean, it's really NVIDIA or AMD at this point. And I personally, in my opinion, I think NVIDIA is better, but I will say I haven't exactly tested AMD. I've just seen that from anecdotal evidence. But anyway.
Yeah. I've seen people in like videos and stuff that use NVIDIA, and it looks good to me.
Yeah, well, I mean, to me, NVIDIA, you get a good bang for your buck, and the rendering support for certain applications is really good with it. Yeah. And so for me, I mean, I don't care about games. All I care about is video stuff. So
yeah.
Anyway, there you go. That being said, in the news this week, also, we got the new release of Gimp. And Gimp 2.10.18 is out now. Includes some new features, including a new 3D transform tool. So if you're interested in that, you will be able to check it out here. Of course, we'll have a link in the show notes to it. And so you can check that out there. Looks pretty cool. So you can see in one of the images here, me and Billy's looking at, they're like making the text in this weird way where it looks like it's in 3D space in a 2D image. So it looks really cool.
Looks pretty cool.
Yeah, nice. It looks like they've added some improvements to importing and maybe even exporting PSD files. So that's the, for those not in the know, that right there is, of course, the Photoshop proprietary file format. So always nice to have better support for that because unfortunately, whether you like it or not, Adobe kind of rules the space. So you need to be able to support their stuff. Another big thing that's a big deal here is they're taking steps towards better CYMK support, which if you've ever dealt with doing printed anything, magazines, business cards, your printers are always going to want that color format. And by want, I mean require to do proper printing. Yeah. So it's nice that they're slowly heading that direction, but that's been a sore spot for several years now. So hopefully that will be fixed in the future. I don't really do print stuff, but for those out there that do, hopefully this won't be a problem for you much longer. Looks like they're heading in the right direction, so I'm happy for that. Other improvements include some new icon themes, which are supposed to be high contrast. compact slider controls with improved user integration. Not really sure what that's for. I guess that's like sliders for like different color adjustments and stuff like that. So that's always nice. Some smoothing brush outline previews have been added, things like that. So seems like a pretty nice release. I'll definitely have to check it out.
It sounds very interesting.
Yeah, it does. And finally, here in our news, rounding up our news week, actually, there's one non-open source story we're going to talk about this week, but the last open source story is GNOME Clocks has been redesigned and will now look great on Linux phones, which that's great for anybody that has those. I mean,
I've never heard of a Linux phone.
Yeah, there's really not that many out there. That like the Pine phones, those run Linux, and so it looks like you can run this app on the Pine phone. So I kind of actually would like to get a Pine phone and check it out and just see what it's like, because I like Linux on the desktop. Maybe it'd be nice on the mobile side. Anyway, but there's not really too much to say as far as I'm concerned with clocks. It's a clock app that
tells time.
And has the ability to do stopwatches and alarms, and just so happens to be able to do responsiveness to the point it can work on a mobile device now properly that's running Linux. So that's great for those out there that are using Linux on the mobile side. Again, small market, unfortunately, but maybe that will change. Anyway, so well, let's talk about Microsoft. This is actually somewhat old news. Several weeks ago, Microsoft, I'm sure we've all heard of this company.
Yes.
Microsoft pushed a Windows 10 update that caused the systems to permanently delete files. All of your files.
Well.
On large numbers of systems. And people wonder why I would not say Windows is production ready. Because, production ready things, in my opinion, don't randomly delete all your files. My experience has been production-ready things don't do that. Would you agree, Billy?
That's not good.
Yeah, it's not good. It didn't affect every single Windows 10 user that did the upgrade, but it did seem to affect a large percentage of them. So, I just thought I'd extend the invitation. If you're listening and you want to come to Linux, you want a stable platform, might I suggest anything not Windows. I mean, look, I'd love for you to come to Linux, but hey, Mac OS, it doesn't do that. BSD, it doesn't do that. Just whatever you do, you seriously need to move away from Windows if you can, folks. I mean, I understand some of you can't, and if you can't, I feel bad for you. And,
my computer, it needs updated, and sadly, it cannot be switched to Linux.
Yeah. He's got this little Windows tablet that prevents it from being able to be moved to Linux. At some point, it would be nice to get him on a ThinkPad or something. Because Billy, I really don't think you ever used a computer until you used Linux. It's especially compared to Windows. Windows is it's a different world compared to Linux. And, I used to use Windows. I used Windows, I think it was from 98 until I used a very short amount of time Windows 10. I didn't use it, but on one system, and it wasn't like anything that mattered.
Yeah.
But
I still remember Windows XP.
Yeah.
Or Windows, not that one. I remember that one, but I also remember Windows 98.
Yeah. Windows 98 is pretty fuzzy for me. The first major version I remember using a lot was XP by far. And to me, XP and 7 was some pretty good versions of Windows. But at the end of the day, folks, if you're on Windows, you never tried Linux, listen, it's a totally different world. The stability you get, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I had Windows crash and have stability issues. Where on Linux, I don't. And every time I go back to Windows, I get frustrated because it's like, I don't understand how people deal with this. Yeah. I mean, seriously, like these big enterprise customers that roll out Windows to thousands of machines. Why? Yeah. I mean, I get it. There's Active Directory. Guess what? We can do that on Linux, okay? Look, pretty much everything you can do on Windows, these days you can do on Linux. I mean, with few exceptions. Video production, there's a lot of tools, unfortunately, that's still Windows and Mac only. So if you're doing something like that requires those tools, okay, just get a Mac. I mean, yes, you're going to pay the Apple tax, but at least you won't be using Windows. I mean,
The only other computer system I ever remember using, and I know it's not Linux, but it was those old IBM computers. Way before they had like the Windows and all that. But
yeah, so you're referring to DOS, which was also a Microsoft product. And by the way, I just got to say, I have actually messed around with DOSBox and stuff like that. And I don't know if it's a good representation of what actual DOS was like as far as stability goes, but I have to say, it actually seems pretty stable.
Yeah.
Microsoft, I poke fun at them, but they have a lot of stability issues. Especially Windows used to be a lot less stable or unstable. And part of the reason for that, in my personal opinion, is pretty simple. As a developer, I can tell you a little secret about being a developer. For those that have never wrote code, you know how you check if your code has a bug in it? You have another human being use it. That's how. On a variety of systems, in a variety of configurations, in a variety of ways. And you don't tell them what to do, because they will find bugs you never caught plenty of times. And when you test your own code, you're not going to catch typos. You're not going to catch bugs as much as somebody that is looking with fresh eyes at it. Yeah. So Microsoft, a few years ago, they laid off their entire testing team for the Windows system. Windows, they do not test their updates the way they used to. They had all these different machines, all these common build-out machines that you would run Windows on. They would actually, every update, they would push that update out on every single one of those machines. They would make sure they'd go through, click all the buttons, make sure they'd had automated testing tools that would do it, and they'd had humans that would go back and then do some things as well. And they would make sure that if there was a bug, that they would let the developers know. And they wouldn't push that update out, get ready for this, until it was stable. But now the only testing that they have on Windows is the developers do their own tests, and they do it in some VMs, and that's not the same thing. But anyways, you were going to say something there.
What I think they should do for like these testings, as you were saying, what I think they need to do is like for every update, they should hire a new team of people as testers, and hire them to test it for them. And if it works and there's bugs and they find them, they fix them, then when the next update comes, get a new team in to test them, so they get more fresher.
I mean, I think that's overkill. A good test. The main thing.
It's a good idea, but it is overkill.
Well, here's the reason I say it's overkill, and it's not necessary, is because, look, Windows or any other project, let's say it all comes down to who's testing it. Look, you don't want the developers testing it. That's what matters, okay? Yeah. If you write the code, you don't test the code. And if you don't write the code, you test the... I mean, you know what I'm saying? There needs to be that separation. Yeah. That's how you have either a good test team or a bad test team.
What they need is like 10 people to test it.
I said it when they laid them off. Yeah, they shouldn't have done it. It's bad for business.
Yeah, but
because Linux user market share has went up a lot in the last couple of years because they've laid that testing team off, and people are seeing that, hey, look, there is such thing as reliable software in our current day and age. You just can't have Microsoft write it because they won't test it. Yeah. Yet these days, Microsoft, who tests their code? You do. And let me tell you a little secret, folks. I don't like being a guinea pig. Maybe you do. And if you do, Microsoft has an insider program where you can get the updates even earlier to break your system. So go check that out. But for the rest of us that wants a stable system that they can actually get work done, Windows at this point, I would argue, is not the system for that. The only exception to that is if you're using the long-term servicing branch, because they don't update the daggone thing very much. They're very, very much more careful about updating that, and they don't push feature updates to it. It's very much non-cutting edge, and from what I can tell, it's actually stable compared to regular Windows 10. I mean, it's still Windows 10, so it's still not as stable as Linux. But let's be realistic. Windows, to my knowledge, has never been as stable as Linux. That's just that's the reality of it, folks. Windows, Mac OS and Linux and BSD, they're all either Unix or Unix-like. The Unix philosophy, which these are all based on, makes a rock-solid desktop and server platform. And honestly, I don't understand why Microsoft doesn't just fork a Linux distribution, fork BSD, and say that we're done here. Because it's very clear to anybody that's paid any attention to Microsoft in the last few years, they have a few developers on their team. They don't even have just a Windows team anymore. Now they're part of the Office team. And I mean, come on. The Office team, their whole focus is Office. It's pretty clear that Windows is an afterthought. It's clear Microsoft isn't interested in maintaining Windows. It's all legacy for them. It's not where they make their money from anymore. And so I think they need to just say, look, we're not making money off of this thing anyway. Why don't we just make a Linux distro? I mean, and the other thing too is there is so much open source collaboration out there that if Microsoft did that, they wouldn't have to have that many developers. They could have one or two developers that could approve code changes for, the final stable and build ISOs every couple months for each, major release or whatever. That would be it. They wouldn't need to really hire a full team of developers for that. And guess what? In the Linux world, people will voluntarily test stuff. So you don't need to push updates on them that's going to break stuff. There is people, I'm not one of them. I mean, I will run it like in a VM, but like that's not really that good for testing. But there's people that will actually, on dedicated hardware, run, the latest Ubuntu LTS, or not LTS, but the latest, because that's stable, but the latest Ubuntu Alpha or the latest Ubuntu Beta, right? And so for those people, they're always submitting bugs, and they're making it better for people like me that wants to actually have a stable version. And so Microsoft, I feel like they just need to do this, and they should just call up Canonical, because Canonical and them, they've worked together before. They could partner together to build a Linux distro. They could base it on Ubuntu. I mean, literally they copy Ubuntu these days in Canonical so heavily in some areas, it's really not even funny. For example, one thing that they're doing, I thought that was really interesting with Windows 10, if you've ever noticed the version numbers in Windows 10, and then you notice the version numbers in Ubuntu, what you notice that's interesting about those, we got Ubuntu 2004 coming out in a few months. We got Windows 2004 coming out in a few months. Notice any similarities with those version numbers by any chance, Billy?
I do. I see.
I thought you might. But yeah, so they're using the same version scheme for version numbers at this point, and they're doing the same kind of release cadence pretty much for OS releases. I got off into a rant, but hey, that's okay. I'll give you something long to listen to on your commute today. But I'm just saying, like, Microsoft, they need to do that. Joe Collins from the Easy Linux Project, he made a video about this a while back. Go check it out. I plug everybody. This is why no one listens to the whole show. But seriously, go check his stuff out. Great guy. He's been on the show before, but he did a video about this a while back, and I fully agree with what he said, which is Microsoft just needs to, go make a Linux distro. So anyways, Microsoft, you've got me, which is probably not that smart, and you got Joe Collins over here, very intelligent guy in my opinion.
And you got me, a person who's a noob, even saying agreeing. Okay,
so the point is you've got everybody's opinion, the noob, the expert, and the in-between. So just go make it, okay? And who knows? Where it's based on Linux, you'll have to open source it. Vincent might even use it. Probably not, but he might.
There's a possibility.
I mean, hey, I got Windows on the drive for just messing around with sometimes, so maybe. Anyway, but that concludes the regularly scheduled news and rant section of our show, even though the rant's not scheduled. Maybe we should do a rant every week. I could do that. Anyway.
We should just have like one episode a week or so, or every other week, and we just talk about random topics. Take a break from the news and stuff like that. Just talk about what's on our mind.
We already have the ability to do that in the show. That's kind of
I know, that's what I'm saying about the rant.
That's kind of like the main topic idea, was just the random topic that comes to mind. That's like, we should talk about software development on Linux this week. And that was a nice segue, because that's what our main topic is this week, everyone. Yep. So let's talk about this. Software development. Why would you want to build an app for Linux as a software developer, right? Well, there's a couple really good reasons. Obviously, as a software developer on Linux, you already know where I stand on this issue. You should be developing software for Linux. And let me list a few reasons why, everybody. So first big thing, very stable platform. We literally was just discussing this a minute ago, how Microsoft, if they switched to using Linux as a base for their OS, would be way more stable, basically instantly. So that's one big thing. But another big thing, too, about using Linux is it's better for the developer. I mean, let's be realistic. As a developer, we're kind of selfish. Look, if you make it easy for us, we're way more interested than if you make it hard on us. I would much rather not develop software for Windows, as it's such a pain. Even if you paid me, I'm like, I'm going to convince you to try to do it on Linux and pay me less. Like, I'm just saying, I do not want to have to build stuff for Windows, because Windows as a system, folks, it's hard to write for in comparison to Linux. And Mac OS, it's better. But again, if you ask me, Linux by far is the easiest platform to write code for. Again, it's an opinion. You're welcome to disagree with us. But I don't know about Billy. He might actually not agree. But you are welcome to disagree with me. But
I disagree with whatever sounds good.
Well, okay then.
I'm a yes man.
Yeah. You
Not all the time.
should actually state your real opinions.
I do sometimes, but if I do agree with it, I will agree.
Okay. So in other words, you're just saying you have opinions. Congratulations. Everyone does. Anyway, exactly. So anyway, there's a couple big things. One, you're getting really good support when it comes to development on Linux, right? This is under that development, why it's good for developers kind of subcategory here. It's good for developers because it is designed to be easy to be able to write code for, right? Whether you're writing C, whether you're writing Python, doesn't matter what the language is. It is dirt simple to get libraries on Linux. It is dirt simple to be able to build an application. It's not that hard. And for example, you want to put an icon on the user's desktop. Some OSs, Windows, you know who you are. Mac OS to a point, but not as bad. Building these icons out. Linux, I think, Mac OS, I actually think their system might be a little bit easier, quite honestly, for the developer, but not by much. But I think Linux gives you more control, the way that you can do it in Linux. And so I prefer the Linux way, obviously. And so with the .desktop files, you make this file that is part of your application bundle. And then what happens is this right here, you put it in a special folder on Linux. There's a special folder. I'm not going to go into it. You can Google it. It's not going to be interesting to listen to on the podcast. But the long story short is you just put the daggone file in there. It's a little text file with some parameters in there, and then magically your icon shows up on the desktop and the menus in Linux. It's a standard way to do this, and nobody else has anything like it in the world. Linux and BSD, that's it. And Linux and BSD are basically cousins, so they're, most things are the same for both or similar. But the thing is, just think about that. It's so easy to be able to put that icon in the dock, in the start menu on Linux. It is so easy to build a package for Linux. So this is what we would like to call an installer in Windows. So for example, I'm thinking about making a video series on the Open Source Tonight channel where I actually go over building like a simple Python app, packaging it as a deb package, which is the standard package format for Ubuntu, Debian, Linux Mint, etc. And it's so easy to package for Linux, especially the Debian-based stuff. I will admit that some distributions, it's a little bit harder, and I really only know how to do it in CentOS, Red Hat, Fedora, and then the Ubuntu, Debian derivative distros. But that's like the bulk of the market anyway. So that's like most of it. But there is like cross-platform, cross-platform if you count like between Linux distros, packaging formats like snaps and app images, which I honestly know less about. I'm actually looking more into that. I actually created a SnapHub account, or what's it called? Snapcraft it is, I believe, account the other day with Ubuntu. So that way, if I ever decide to publish a Snap app, I'll be able to do it. At this point, I don't know if I'm going to or not. I might. Maybe there's some interest from the community for me to like show how to do that. Maybe I'll build like a test app. Maybe I'll package that app that I was talking about as both a deb and a snap. I personally prefer snaps, or not snaps, but deb packages myself though. But anyway, the point is building a deb package is really, really easy. Basically what you do, you build a simple folder structure, put a couple text files in the right place, and put your binaries, your actual program files in the right place, and that's it. And then the deb automatically will move them to the right place and everything. And you can have the deb on your website and have people download it. You can put it in a repo so that way that people can get updates. There's several ways to do it. Or if you're in, good with the Ubuntu people or the Debian people, you can actually submit your package into their official public repos, and then they don't even have to add your repo because it's just part of the official repos. That last one, you kind of got to be, I don't want to say you have to be special, but you have to be a sanctioned developer, I guess you could say. They got to check your code and vet it, and they got to vet you, I guess you could say, to a point. But that really to me is the preferred way to go if you can do it. That being said, right now the stuff that I have out there, I don't really have anything that's probably worth putting in the Debian repos. So, but eventually I'd like to have stuff there that it would be useful. So, anyway, I think that that's good to be able to put stuff there. But I'm just saying it is good for the user. It's good for the developer because, see, with the developer, on Windows, you have to write custom updating stuff to be able to update your apps. On Mac OS, it's the same way. On Linux, the updating's built into the OS, right? You make a simple repo, which is easy to do. If you can build a website, you can build a repo. And what you do, you go out, you do that. Makes it really easy to provide updates. And with Linux, with the package management systems like apt and yum, it makes it really easy to go into the system and be able to say, okay, these are the dependencies that I want to, pull to make this app work. So it makes it really easy to make sure everything's installed. You know how on Windows you install something and then half the time you'll start it the first time and it will yell at you saying .NET framework is not installed or something is not installed. That doesn't happen on Linux.
I've had problems on mine where it says there's no room to the update and stuff like that, but I've made room and it just still says there's.
Yeah, so that's a separate issue, but as far as like the .NET stuff and stuff like that, see that's what I'm talking about and that's exactly what I'm saying. See, on Linux you won't get that because as the developer, if the developer has configured their package correctly, I should say, because as the developer you're going to go in there on your package, you're going to say, okay, this is a Python program. You know what we're going to need? We're going to need Python. We're going to need these Python libraries. So it's going to get those pre-installed for you, right? You're not going to have to worry about them not being there. And so it makes it really easy to ensure that everything's there. Or if it's a C app, the same thing. Make sure these C libraries are on the system, right? So it's really nice because under Windows, the installer has to do that or your app has to do that. And that's code you have to write. That's more complexity you have to deal with as the developer. And at the end of the day, do we really want complexity? I mean, come on. I don't know about the other developers out there, but I know I want dirt simple, okay?
Yeah, I'd rather have something just simply laid out for me and understand it easily.
And easy to deal with, especially if you're developing a lot of apps. I mean, it's one thing if you have to do this for one app. It's a totally different thing when you have to do it for 5 apps, 500 apps, 1,000 apps. And so that's great. The other big thing, too, is a lot of developers, they will work for big companies. And big companies, when they're using Linux, just like on Windows and Mac, they want to be able to push an app to thousands of systems at once. And contrary to what people believe, that's actually really easy to do on Linux. And I say contrary to mostly Windows users that have not used Linux, because it's actually really easy to push updates to Linux systems in an automated fashion. There's tools out there to do it. You do a mass SSH connection to hundreds of systems and be able to instantly install a package. There's several ways to do this. But these deb packages, these yum packages, these RPM packages they're called actually. They're not called yum packages, but the RPM packages on your Fedora, Debian, CentOS, your deb packages on your Debian-based distributions like Ubuntu and stuff like that. It makes it really easy to automate and install out of thousands of systems. You build an app for this works, this workplace, push it out to thousands of systems in seconds. It ensures everything would be installed correctly. It's wonderful. I have not had to do a mass deployment of anything, but I've been deployed to several machines before like this, and it is so painless. And on Windows, it is so painful in comparison, in my opinion. Especially if you don't have Active Directory set up, which again, for a smaller size business, you may not. So, folks, let me tell you right now, if you're on the fence about developing stuff for Linux, give it a try. Sure, it's not a perfect environment, but in comparison to the way that the Windows ecosystem is, it's like night and day. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's so a different environment. It's so much different. Like, for example, one thing, dealing with the C compiling and dealing with Python apps on Windows, those two things alone drive me nuts because you have to get Microsoft C compiler or somebody else's. Those are a pain to deal with under Windows in my experience. Or Python, for example, can be a pain under Windows. Dependencies for Python is a pain under Windows sometimes. Linux, while those things still can happen, the bulk of the time, it's painless. And nothing in life is perfect, but I will take 99% of the time, 98% of the time, something like that, high 90% of the time, right, percentages where I'm not going to have problems over the other way around. So for me, Linux is a great platform to develop on. It's great for the user too, though. And so, Billy, any thoughts about this? I mean, I know you're not a software developer, but as an end user, this still affects you, right?
Yeah.
So any thoughts about this? Anything you'd like to say to the developers out there listening? Some words of encouragement?
Say just go for it. It just sounds interesting. The way, the simplicity of it as you're describing it.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's really simple to be able to do this. So in Linux, when it comes to dealing with app installs, so like I said, the dev package will put the app in the right place with easy config to do it.
Yeah.
And what you're going to do, generally, when you're installing it from a package, you will put it in /usr/bin and then /your package. So your /your package name /your binary or whatever.
It sounds so simple that even I could do it, and I'm a noob.
Yeah, I mean, making a package, honestly, I really believe I could walk you through it. And maybe I'm too cocky, but I do believe I could do it. It's not that hard. There's even, for the Debian packages, there's a tool I used to use. I forget what it's called right now because I don't use it that much anymore. But there was a GUI tool that literally would let you build a deb package, and you didn't even have to write any code. You didn't have to write any configs by hand. It would do it all for you. You just say, I want a desktop icon here. I want it to be this image. I want the install to go here. Right. I mean, you still don't understand how the process worked, but it was able to automate it. And honestly, that was not a bad tool. It was actually really nice. But I found that if you understood the back end, you could just write a bash script that could automate it for something. Because the one negative to that tool is, to me, it was a little slower to rebuild another instance.
Yeah.
Like rebuilding from bash script, you just, rerun the bash script. And that's it and walk away. With this tool, you got to go through the wizard again real quick. I mean, you can pull up from a project and then, just really quickly go through the wizard. And maybe they've changed it so you can just go straight to the end and just build, because that would be really cool. Actually, they might have had that. Honestly, I take that back. I think they actually had that anyway. Never mind. I told you it's been a while since I've used this tool, and I just thought to myself, wait, I think it did actually have a button in the menu that lets you do that. But anyway, I forget what that tool is called, but I'll put a link in the description of the podcast in the show notes about it. But really cool tool, very powerful. But the point is, it's really easy to be able to build a deb package. Yum packages are not Yum packages, but their official name, the name escapes me again, RPM packages. They are a little harder to build in my experience, but not by much. And I don't really have experience of app images or snaps very much, so can't really speak to those. But from what I can tell, those don't seem to be, especially the snaps seem kind of easy to build. The app images, it depends on the language. I've noticed with Python, it's kind of hard to build, but I've noticed that building snaps, depending on what you're using, can be really easy, or app images. For example, if you're building snaps or app images, either one from an Electron-based app, there's literally tools out there that will do it for you. You don't even have to do anything. Unfortunately, for someone like me that's a Python developer, for the most part, I mean, I've built some stuff in Electron, but I prefer to build most things in Python. So for me, that's going to be a problem. So I'm going to have to do things a little more manually. But I just like building deb packages anyway. So for me, that's really not going to probably change. But you never know. But yeah, everybody. So software development on Linux, I think that it is where it's at. And I think if you're a software developer and you don't know how to develop on Linux, I'm not going to shame you for that. We all have to start somewhere. I think what you need to do, you need to Google it. You need to start doing the research, because once you realize how great it is to develop under Linux, you're going to want to build everything under Linux. And honestly, you can't always do that, unfortunately, in life. But, when you can, trust me, you're going to want to after that. I really believe that. That's always been my experience. I have yet to have a developer say to me, I'd rather build a Windows app. After they've wrote something for Linux, I have never heard, to be fair, I don't know every developer in the world by any stretch of the definition, but so far I have yet to hear any developer say, Linux is just so hard to write for compared to Windows. I mean, anyone that's ever used both Windows and Linux for software development, I've never heard anyone say that. So maybe you're the first person. Leave us a comment on the YouTube video or send us an email. But I tell you, I've never heard anybody say it before. And unless you're being sarcastic, I highly doubt you're going to say it now. But maybe you are. Yeah. And if so, please give us some information, because I'm always interested in hearing differences of opinion, as long as we can respectfully disagree. But the point is, I think that at the end of the day, the end users of Linux, why does this matter to you? Well, why does it matter? Because you want to be able to have software choice. You want to be able to have choices of good software for Linux. So even if you're not a software developer, it still matters, right? Because if you don't have anybody writing software, then who's going to be writing the software, right? So, I mean, there's a lot of software already on Linux. So obviously, we definitely have got that, but we have major players missing on Linux, like Adobe, for example. Big software houses like Adobe, they don't build stuff for Linux very much. There's a couple things they built for Linux, but most of their software is not available on Linux. And like it or not, they're a big player in the industry, and I think that we should have big players like Adobe on Linux. If you don't want to use their stuff, that's fine. You should have the option to not install it. And I'm not saying it should come pre-installed. It shouldn't. But I'm just saying we need big players like this. If we really want Linux to be mainstream and to be used by the majority of the world's population at some point in our lifetimes, we're going to need major software vendors like Adobe to be able to come to Linux. For so many people, I have seen just a few major software vendors like Adobe holding them back. And like Joe said a few weeks ago on video production on this very podcast, why does people not want to move away from Adobe when there is good tools on Linux? And there's one reason. It's called workflow. When you've got things figured out in a piece of software and you've got everything set up that's making your money, that's paying your bills, that's making your films go on the movie screen, you don't want to change that. And I can't really say as a filmmaker, as a software developer, that I blame you. Workflow, I get it. It's hard to change workflow. I remember when I first made the jump to Linux. It was not as painless as I wish I could say it should have been. I mean, it wasn't that bad.
It
but
took you time to get used to it.
It did. And I mean, to be fair, when I made the jump to Linux for the first time, that was when it was the real learning curve. When I made the last major jump off of Windows and became a full-time Linux user several years ago, that was way easier because at that point, I already knew what I was getting myself into. And that's what I would advise people that want to switch, either as software developers, switching to write code for it, or even better, just as daily users, whether you're a software developer or just a general user. Get a spare machine, run it in a VM, use a friend's Linux machine as much as you can, whatever the use case you can get to be able to use Linux as much as possible, because as a new user, going in cold turkey is a bad idea. You're going to get frustrated. You're going to want to leave. You are not
what you're getting into.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of that, you need to use Linux more, so that way eventually I want to put you on Linux on a ThinkPad or something and give it to you. So whenever that happens, I want you to be comfortable with Linux. So I need to give you Linux training, get you used to it, and you just
give me some training wheels.
Yeah, exactly. Get you used to it, so that way that you'll be able to swim when I throw you in the ocean, so to speak, here, right?
Yeah, you throw me off the deep end.
Exactly. When you're in the deep end of the pool, we need to make sure you can swim.
Put me in the kiddie pool first. Let me get learned, and then
the shallow end will be first. You'll learn how to swim there successfully, and then when you're confident that you can swim in deep water, then I'll say, okay, I think you're ready to go. Billy, go swim into the deep side of the pool. The lifeguards are standing by over here. We've got our Linux terminals opened and SSH'd into the machine in case something goes horribly wrong. We can reboot it or something real quick and get you out of trouble.
Throw me off the deep end. You just walk away.
I'm not going to do that. That would be very mean. Some people maybe would do that, but I wouldn't do that. Now, But anyway, our show is getting towards the end, everybody. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in this week to Open Source Tonight. You can find us where podcasts are available. Got a couple of announcements we're going to end the show with here right before we go, though. One, we are now on iHeartRadio, and we are now, I think is it Stitcher? No, it's not Stitcher. It's a TuneIn we are now on. So we're on TuneIn Podcast, and we're on iHeartRadio Podcast. You can search for us on both. Open Source Tonight, capital letters at the beginning of each word. So title case. So again, check us out on those platforms there. Give the show some love on those platforms. Would be greatly appreciated. They were supposed to send me an email on both cases letting me know when we got approved, and they didn't on either one. But hey, I'm just happy we got approved, because from what I've heard, those are kind of hard to get on. So we did it, everybody. We're on all of the major platforms, to my knowledge, for podcasts at this point. I think Stitcher. I'm not sure if we're on Stitcher. That's another major platform, so I need to look into that. But everybody else, I'm pretty sure we're on right now. We're on Apple Podcasts. We're on Google Podcasts. We are on Spotify Podcasts. Everybody's got podcasts in their name. So we are on all the major podcast places these days. We're on iHeartRadio Podcasts. We are on TuneIn Podcasts. So again, almost all the major places. If you exclude Stitcher, we're pretty much on everything now. So I think at this point we can safely say we're everywhere. So that's good. But again, don't forget to listen and Thanks everybody so much. You know, this is our 11th episode, or no, it's our 12th episode, I think. We just passed the 10th episode recently. I know that. So again, I just want to thank everybody. You know, we are officially, 10 episodes, over 10 episodes into the show's history. Thank you everybody so much for supporting us. Really appreciate it. And, hopefully you'll be here for, many, many episodes to come. And thanks everybody again. Billy, anything you'd like to say to the audience here?
Just thank you for supporting the podcast and all that and the station, and I hope everybody is doing good.
Yeah, and also, just so everyone's aware, he's referring to the radio station that we're recording on right now. But anyway, everybody, so, this is Open Source Tonight. Thanks, everybody, so much. We're going to try and get Carmen back on again, and we got some interesting hosts that we're going to have on as guest hosts coming up. Going to be really interesting. So if you stick around, you're going to probably be very entertained. This episode, I feel like kind of got dry towards the end, so I apologize about that, but, it's software. Sometimes it can get a little dry. The news has been a little bit slow, so, yeah. Anyway, everybody, but you've been listening to Open Source Tonight this week, and Billy, tell us where they can find you online.
Well, you can find me on Facebook and on Twitter.
All right, that's Billy Everso, everybody. Look him up on Facebook and Twitter. You can find me at Vincent Maggard on YouTube, at Vincent Maggard on Twitter as well. And hold on, it gets even better. You can also find me at vincentmaggard.com, opensourcetonight.com, and Eastern KY's radio website, Eastern Kentucky Indie Radio's website, which is eastkyradio.com, eastkyradio.com. Check out our new website there. You can tune in and listen to us record live every week on Eastern Kentucky Indie Radio at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time right now. So again, don't forget to tune in. We might not start at exactly 4, but hopefully we'll at least be on getting ready. And until next week, thanks for listening. Good day, everybody.